This is the Eerie Hour.
Welcome to the Eerie Theory Hour. I'm your host, Guster Ding, and I'm here as always with a resident historian, Marty Coins. Say hello, Marty.
How is it going, everyone? Long time no hear with the
Long
meeting.
time no here. That is a
Since we
new
can't see
statement,
each other really.
new sentence right there, never before said. And
How you doing?
normally it'd be across the table, but we're actually across the internet today because social distancing is so super important right now.
Across the world.
Across the world even, is a local artist who recently opened an exhibit titled Things I Molded Out of Ground Sausage. It's Gert Bergelster. How's it going, Gert?
Oh, just dandy. I was gonna bring some. I was gonna show off some of my sausage moldings, my sculptures, but my cats got to them. So
Well, we're all waiting with bated breath for your next one. The
Yeah,
first
I
one that
made
you showed me was absolutely delicious.
yeah. Oh, you ate some of mine too.
Oh, I wasn't supposed to eat it?
No.
Oh,
I
there
That's no good.
weren't any preservatives or anything on there, were there?
not enough apparently.
Well,
'Cause-
today we're going to be talking about. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say I make a really good sausage snake.
Interesting.
It is, and it's not what you think. He's not just rolling it like Play-Doh. These are legitimate sculptures of serpents, like dragons from from Far East lore. Well, today we're going to be talking about the Battle of Los Angeles.
It's a good one.
It is an interesting event that took place all the way back in 1942.
That is true. In February. Yeah.
So what's the story with this one, Marty?
Well, the Battle of Los Angeles took place on the late evening of February 24th to the early morning of the 25th in 1942. What's important to mention and note here is that this was only 3 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, which prompted the United States to join in World War II. Not
Right.
to mention the bombardment of Elward, which occurred a day earlier. Potentially due to high tensions and itchy trigger fingers, U.S. forces opened fire on the skies above Los Angeles in the early morning of the 25th. In the aftermath, collateral damage from shrapnel was reported to vehicles, and as many as 5 civilians died as an indirect result. 3 were from car accidents, and 2 were from heart attacks.
That's got to be a pretty scary evening, right?
Right. Yeah.
You're out and like the whole city just goes dark.
And
just black, and then air raid sirens, and then you're somebody like me who weighs significant. I'm not going to say my exact weight, but significantly over the weight that a normal person should be, or with high blood pressure, and that starts happening, I'd probably have a heart attack and die too. So,
I can
By the
only
way, if
imagine.
you guess the correct weight, we will give you a free T-shirt.
God.
I'm
We're
down
resorting-
for it. Guess my
We're
weight.
resorting
based
to
on my voice.
carnival tactics here.
It's gonna be. Oh no! What if our primary listening base is carnival is carnies that guess weight based on voice?
They're probably really good at it.
Like, they're just sitting there rubbing their hands together, like, yes, free T-shirts.
Come on up, guess your weight, win a prize.
Sorry, Marty. Go ahead.
So the government eventually concluded that a weather balloon released at 1 a.m. was the source of the panicked response. However, reports from soldiers and civilians paint a vastly different picture. And do you know what that is, guys?
I couldn't fathom a guess. It's definitely not written on the sheet of paper in front of
Is
me.
it-
No, it's
is it
definitely not
racism?
aliens.
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 Aliens. That's right.
Aliens.
Today we're going to be talking about aliens. We're
Well,
going to talk about the
possibility.
Battle of LA and get in a little bit to
UFOs and
Yeah.
UFOs and some other interesting stuff that we discussed before the podcast today.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be
So
interesting to see the similarities in some of the things that we've researched. But
oh, we were supposed to do research. No, just kidding.
no, we already did all that. We did the research and we've compiled it together so we can use it appropriately and as needed. Well, without further ado, let's dive on in, Marty.
Now, we know that most Americans know of the attack on Pearl Harbor, but in order to better understand the mindset of military personnel in LA at the time, it seems pertinent that we cover some of the details. So, we all know that the attack on Pearl Harbor was a preemptive attack by the Japanese Naval Air Service that was intended to prevent the American Navy from interfering in their operations in the Pacific. Attacks they had planned on the United Kingdom's, Netherlands, and America's overseas territories.
So the Japanese were planning to attack some positions controlled by the United Kingdom's, Netherlands, and American overseas territories. That's what this is saying, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So they
So-
decided to attack Pearl Harbor first before we got involved. Okay.
So, but what's interesting is that at 7:48 a.m., Japanese aircraft began to bombard Pearl Harbor with bombs, torpedoes, and machine gun fire. A total of 353 aircraft were involved in that raid. In the end, over 3,500 Americans were dead or wounded, and 4 battleships were sunk. This sneak attack by the Japanese prompted the U.S. to join in World War II. From that point, the U.S. began to heavily mobilize for the war. Anti-aircraft guns were also installed in bunkers that were all built as a defense against any more air raids against the Japanese.
Yeah, so you could definitely imagine the tension in the air on the west coast of the United States. Hawaii was already hit. The next base over is going to be on the west coast of the United States. So
yeah, and it wasn't just bombs. I mean, they didn't they kamikaze like their
kamikaze bombers were involved. Yeah,
They were known for that.
The Japanese
no
during World War II, they had some pretty vicious tactics. But we'll save wartime atrocities by 1940s Japan for another episode. Instead, we'll talk about some aliens today. So moving on, the night of the battle. Let's get into the actual Battle of LA itself. Like,
all right.
Paint me a picture here. We already covered it briefly, but
right. So it's hard to paint a picture that this is this chaotic. So I'll do my best here. The night of the battle. So as we all know, on February 24th in 1942, which is the night that the event began, U.S. Navy intelligence issued a warning to the Army in L.A. at 7 p.m. that an attack on the California coastline could happen within the next 10 hours. So the coast was put on yellow alert, which essentially means, hey, be alert, be aware, we could be bombed. Nothing to fear here.
Keep your eyes open.
Right.
Be on the lookout.
So, as you can imagine, everyone was on edge. It was almost a certainty at this point that the Japanese were bringing the war to the American homeland. Though after 3 hours, the alert was reduced to white, and the situation went back to normal. However, on February 25th, 1942 at 1:44 a.m., it's been noted that 3 separate radar stations picked up an unidentified flying object approaching the city of Los Angeles. By 2 a.m., however, the target was roughly 200 kilometers offshore. During this time, the gunners in the city were put on green alert, which means ready to fire at any incoming air raids.
Kapow.
Kapow all rats, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's show them what we're made of, boy.
Yeah.
My finger itches.
And I think the Battle of LA really showed the true efficacy of the United States military.
Right?
If it flies, make sure it doesn't.
Right, exactly. We'll talk about that a little bit more later because, boy, the Army and the Navy were pointing back and forth at each other.
And there's a lot going on now with the Navy in particular.
Oh, yeah.
In the alien discussion, we're going to get into that as well.
Yeah. In today's terms, I think they flexed pretty hard.
They flexed and yoked many shells.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, They yote whatever was in the sky out of the
That's
sky.
right.
That's for
That's
sure.
right.
At least they
They
think
done
did.
yote it good.
At least they tried. They definitely tried.
Roughly 25 minutes later, at 2:25 a.m., the object on radar was tracked and was roughly 5 kilometers off the coast, and the city was startled awake as the alarm sounded for an air raid, sending chills through every citizen in LA, which is
Well, that's got to be, like we mentioned earlier, incredibly intense.
Oh yeah.
We can't nothing in modern history. The United States hasn't had a raid on U.S. soil since Pearl Harbor, I think. So there's no way that we could fathom that kind of
Right.
no.
that kind of
I
situation.
mean, could you imagine
It's
if they
truly
took
insane.
the power of the attack that they did on Pearl Harbor and replicated that 3 or 4 more times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would have taken over. I mean, that would have been it.
Well,
And
fortunately, we
would have been a
found our way
mistake.
to nuclear power first.
Yeah.
Kapow.
That's kapow indeed. Not that I necessarily believe nuclear weapons are a good thing,
No, they're not.
but but I
Depends on
will
what
say
side
that
you're on.
that at least we had them first.
I mean, I can't imagine hearing those sirens. I mean, I get like an uneasy feeling when I just hear the curfew sirens go off in local towns.
There's curfew sirens.
Oh yeah, in like smaller towns.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
There
That's
used to
crazy.
be. They don't do it anymore. But when I was a kid, I could hear them, and I was like, "Oh wow,
I've heard
on?
air raid sirens be tested here.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
It only once that I can recall. But even then, it just sent chills down my spine, like because I was familiar enough with what an air raid siren sounded like and what it was that
Did it send
I was
chills
in
through
my
your spine?
mid-teens or something that it sent chills down my spine.
I mean, even just a test, right? I mean, why are they testing this? Are we really going to get air raided? What's going on?
No, but it's probably a good idea to know if it's working or not. This was when I was a teen, and
Emergency
it was only a few years after 9/11, maybe
Look.
2003 or 2004.
Yeah.
So,
look, we've all stormed the beaches of Normandy on Medal of Honor, so we've all kind of been there. We've seen some shit.
right. I'm forgetting that everybody here listening and involved in this podcast has played Call of Duty. We're basically veterans.
That's funny.
I mean, if Instagram models can call themselves models, I can call myself
a model.
If Green Day can compare themselves to a soldier coming home from war in one of their songs, then we're definitely veterans for playing Call of Duty.
Well, I think that song was more about his father, I believe, but that's a story for another day.
Once again, we have a lot of those.
Yeah.
Just wait till our next episode.
That's right.
The Green Day story.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Are they punk?
No, it turns out that they're decent human beings. Unacceptable. I want my money back.
For all the concerts I went to. All right.
Have you been to a Green Day concert?
Never.
Me neither. I wouldn't. Not my thing.
I mean, I don't want to admit this on a live stream, but I've gone to a Britney Spears concert when I was a teenager.
Oh,
everybody's been to a Britney Spears concert when they were a teenager.
She's kind of an alien. That kind of fits.
Dude, yeah, that was eerie enough.
Remember when her hair fell out? Because
I thought she ripped it out.
There's actually there's a creepypasta that I read that was about
Britney Spears?
Britney Spears. She's involved in it, I would say, and it was something about Fallout 3, if I remember correctly, the video game Fallout 3, where somebody found a hidden code or hidden message in Fallout 3 that was predicting things in the future, and one of the things they predicted was that Britney would win an award, like at an award show. I think it's the Grammys for music.
That's
she'd win a Grammy. It hasn't happened yet. I mean, she may have She may have, but in the past. But I mean, like, it was predicting that in the future she would win another one, and that would like be the signal that the world was about to end.
Oh,
So
it's like the
Well, she's due
Nostradamus
for a
of-
comeback. These pop stars come back.
They do.
Yeah,
They come back hard.
that's true.
I'd be down for that. Except for the
some Britney 2.0.
Yeah, except for the
false.
except for the fact that, go ahead.
If I find out that the story of Fallout 3 was all because of a pop star making a comeback, I'm gonna
Oh
be
my God,
pretty.
that would be so. Everybody would uninstall. I'm done.
That's the next episode of Eerie Theory.
I mean, Harambe did try to warn us about 2020, but
He did.
Uh,
That was all sign. That was sign language. He was telling the baby
Only if he
when
can
you
speak
grow.
English.
uh, anyway, since we've gotten off track a little bit,
That's okay.
back, back to the Battle of L.A.
All right, so obviously know that the object was detected 5 kilometers off. I think as it got nearer and nearer, the object detected on radar mysteriously vanished and never actually reappeared. However, eyes on the ground tell a different story. Reports of sightings of objects in the air began to flood the information center that they had set up there in LA, which is interesting because if there's nothing on radar. But then again, radar back then wasn't really the best, though, was it?
Nothing on radar. The government said it's in the end that it was a weather balloon, but people were seeing objects all over the sky. And there's a really famous image from the Battle of LA of spotlights focused on some object in the sky. And while obviously you can't take that picture taken in the 1940s and say that is certainly an alien craft, it
certainly looks alien.
It is pretty. The shape is pretty spot on to what we'd consider a flying saucer.
And I'm actually going to make an interesting
shape of a UFO.
It does indeed, and I'm going to make an interesting connection from that picture to something I noticed on the newly released Navy UFO videos, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay,
that's awesome.
That's an interesting. I never really paid attention to it until. So go ahead.
And there's something else that I want to cover, and we'll do this again when we get a little bit later, and that's the why did aliens start showing up about this time in the World War II era through to the 40s, through the 40s through the 60s.
Yeah, you do have an interesting theory about that. I've heard you say this before.
So,
I have not.
It's worth hearing.
I want to hear it.
Well, we'll talk about it.
Indeed, we will.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
When we got to get to the point when we're talking about the grays.
Have you checked your shower head for a camera?
No.
I found one.
I figure if they're watching, then Wait, you found one?
Oh yeah, I found one. I put on a pretty good show when I found it.
Creepy?
Yeah, that's terrifying.
I wonder who's on the other end of this lens.
I've been receiving a lot less ads for that kind of stuff. Let me just tell you.
It's Mecha Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh no.
So now at 3:07 a.m., the artillery units were given the okay to fire, as mentioned before. The skies above LA erupted. The firing was sporadic. Fireworks in the sky, they say. Pop, 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 kapow.
Yeah. Let's show them how we celebrate the 4th of July.
By hitting nothing.
Well, I mean, fireworks.
It's possible that there was just a weather balloon and they just vaporized the thing. Like, whatever it was just didn't exist anymore with the number of rounds that were fired there.
I don't know. It's weird because, I mean, if you think about it, the object was off the coast, not in the weather balloon.
That's true.
The weather balloon was released on land, right?
That's right.
Like northwest of where everything came in from, I think. So,
right.
However, it was 200 kilometers off the coast, and then it came up to the coast. So that's a really fast weather balloon.
What were the weather reports that day?
I don't know. I couldn't really find much into it. I do know that there are weather services out there that can compile data and look back in time to see.
That'd be worth looking.
Yeah,
So if the direction of the wind was blowing towards the coast, which it could have been.
It's possible.
It-
I mean, usually it is.
The
right?
weather, yeah, the weather balloon could have been floating this way.
But it was released on land, so it would have only blown further inland. It wouldn't have gone out to sea then back in.
It is also worth mentioning that I don't know if I'm getting too far ahead here, but our radar systems at the time weren't the most reliable.
No, they weren't.
I mean, it was
No.
pretty new. It was pretty new technology, so
And I think
mean-
the more advanced radar systems were over in I think like Europe, if I'm remembering correctly.
probably
Um,
that German engineering.
they are pretty good engineers.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's tough to find data back that far without checking like local records. Maybe we'd have to
That's what they
check
did.
a library,
Yep.
so a library database.
I mean, weather stations kept things on paper for
That's right.
decades. That's how these people do it, though. They take
Maybe
all
it
that
was the
data.
weather reports in the weather balloon.
Yeah.
Maybe that. Maybe that.
They're trying to hide it all, man.
Oh my goodness. You're onto something.
I guess we won't get the weather.
So the artillery units opened up firing.
Indeed. Reports
Yep.
that were mentioned that were coming in before of lone fighter planes of up to 200 in high altitude bombers were coming in. The strange thing is, some people, completely coherent in thought, reported seeing nothing. The confusion level was pretty high at this point, as no one could, as no one was a reliable source of information. Shortly after 4 a.m., the event concluded, and over 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft artillery were used, and that's a lot. It's a lot of rounds.
Of specifically of anti-aircraft artillery.
Correct. And there were other rounds being used that weren't.
Did we have any information on how many emplacements there were? How many
No.
how many guns were firing?
No.
Those
really.
1,400 rounds? That's insane, though. That's a
something
lot
I'd
of
probably
ammo.
have to look at the I'd say the Army archives and see if I could pull it up.
That'd be interesting to discuss on a future episode, maybe briefly.
Yeah, definitely. Or have
Yeah. Come back
Yeah,
to it a little bit.
We can always do like callback episodes to if we
Definitely.
get any information wrong or any new information pops up, we can be like, hey.
Here we go. So the immediate aftermath. Well, this is where it gets a little interesting because reports after the event struggle to make any logical sense of what happened that night. And adding even more fuel to the fire was that reports were starting. Yeah, right.
That's, that sounds like a lot of the reports that are probably, coming out of the military today. Just like, well, blah, 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 blah.
Over.
We invaded the Cambodian jungle and blah, 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 blah.
I hired Scatman as a news reporter.
That's funny. Now, reports after the event struggled to make any logical sense of what had happened that night, and adding even more fuel to the fire was that reports were stating planes were gunned down, and others that that during the firing of artillery, shots were reported hitting an object to no effect, including a police officer, which is, when you talk about an officer who is reporting something, you'd think that there would be pretty, I don't know, reliable.
But they weren't able to find anything though, right? Nothing was found. No shrapnel, no bombs.
Nope. Local police investigated and found nothing but shrapnel, and no bombs were dropped, according to the Western Defense Command. However, as a result from the night's activities, as we mentioned before, it was reported that as many as 5 people died that night. 3 were killed in automobile accidents as a result of the blackout, and the other 2 died of heart attacks. There were plenty of injuries from those at the various posts, from broken legs to a radio announcer ramming his head into an awning and suffering a gash over his eye.
that out easy compared to the guy that had the heart attack, though. I think.
Well,
Say so.
Yeah, that, I mean, but I was reading. some of
Ow,
these-
my eye!
My
Ow.
heart.
call for help!
Anybody have a
But I'm
band-aid?
bleeding real bad.
Do we have
Ambulance
power?
shows up. They're like, "This man's bleeding." The other guy's just unconscious because his heart exploded.
I'd say if his heart exploded, he would be more than just unconscious.
Yeah.
Um. So the next thing to note is the reports that came out from the Navy and the Army. An explanation by the military confused the general public even more. The Secretary of Navy, William Knox, stated that it was just a
Just
a
a
fart.
a farce.
It was just a fart.
Oh my God.
How bad of a fart was it? They had to blame on the Japanese.
When your fart is so bad that the government has to write a report on it.
Toxic gases in LA. All right, let's try this again.
Squeak!
He's in the room with one other guy. Somebody goes like, "You just fart." It's like, "Oh my God, is that the Japanese? Shoot him! Shoot him down!"
Bombs.
Some
Alright.
insecure asshole can't handle his fart.
Apparently. That just stinks.
Oh, Marty, I'm gonna put you in. I'm gonna put you into Gert's chains after this one.
Oh no.
I'm
Have
gonna
we even
mold a
cleaned them after
sausage
the last
sculpture.
time?
No, we never clean those.
All right. The Secretary of Navy, William Knox, stated that it was just a false alarm and that there were no planes over LA, and the result was just from jittery nerves. However, the Secretary of War claimed that as many as 15 planes may have been involved. These planes.
Wait, hold on a second. The Secretary of War, is that a position that still exists today?
Would be probably
Because
the
that
Secretary of
sounds like
Army,
something out of World of Warcraft.
right?
Like,
It would be the Secretary of the Army, essentially.
we have to
I
bring
would
this
say.
to the Secretary of War.
Stormwind is under attack.
I know he has. I bet he has a quest for you.
That's right.
Jittery nerves, quest here. Calm the public. Calm the public.
Calm the public.
I would love that quest. you're
You
just
failed.
you're just shooting at people. Stay calm. Stay calm.
You have 5 stars because the public is now absolutely going.
See, the Secretary of the Army sounds like a desk job.
It
The
does.
Secretary of War sounds like a guy with an eye patch that like charges into battle with a greatsword, even though it's modern warfare. Like,
And still wins.
that's right.
When you have a meeting with the Secretary of War, it's a dark room with a long hallway. It's lit by like cool,
Torches?
like, spotlight. Yeah, He's
Torches
sitting
and
on-
like
he's sitting on a cool swivel chair at a desk
it's
under
like
a spotlight.
stone masonry.
He's always got a cigar in his mouth.
That's right.
He's got medals up the wazoo.
That's because he can't fit them on his coat anymore. That's where they go next with him.
Into the wazoo.
Right into the wazoo.
However, the Secretary of War claimed that as many as 15 planes may have been involved. These planes ranged in altitude and speed greatly. His explanation was that either the Japanese planes were flying through, or that it was a commercial airplanes flown by enemy agents.
They had to add the flown by enemy agents part onto that
Yeah, exactly.
because
I mean,
because commercial airplane, if you stop there, like
Uh-oh.
right, but if it was, oh no, they were flown by enemy agents.
They were
Yeah.
commercial airplanes flown by the Japanese. How funny would
That's
that
right.
be?
Clearly traitors of the...
We'll trade you
That's right.
1 plane for 10 of yours.
I once saw the pilot of that plane watch anime. Well, they can't all be winners.
I did that flew
I just
over my
couldn't...
head. That flew
I
over
couldn't
my
come
head.
up with anything to follow that with. I was like, huh.
So, as for the people of LA, the only thing they ever received from the military was an explanation that every effort was being made to ascertain the facts. Now, what's interesting to note is that the Japanese military released a statement saying that they had no craft over LA that night.
Yeah, who you're gonna trust though?
I mean, in the middle of wartime, and you're just
Yeah.
like,
That
hey,
wasn't
Japanese military, did you attack LA? And they're like, no. What?
Especially,
No.
Oh,
especially
okay.
if they were gunned down like so
LA.
bad.
What is an LA?
What's
Like,
in LA? Yeah. Is that legs and ass?
the Battle of Legs and Ass.
Continue.
I'm pretty sure that's
on the
the
strip.
title of a porn that I watched.
Did that? Did the lights go off in that?
Oh, the lights went
the lights stay
the
off.
lights stay on.
No blackout here. Now, reports of balloons were also turned in, and confirmed sources stated that at 3:06 a.m., a weather balloon was spotted over Santa Monica, which later disappeared over South Long Beach. Now, understand, it was reported that the object took over 30 minutes to go 25 miles. However, the scattered reports did not make anything easy to tag the source of the alarm. And for that matter, the Battle of LA remained a mystery. So,
See, going 25 miles, taking 30 minutes to go 25 miles, kind of rules out a plane to me, at least.
well, good. I mean, let's think about that. So, roughly a mile a minute is 60 miles an hour. So, if it took
Yeah.
30 minutes to go 25 miles, it was going slightly under 60 miles an hour in the air. So, I mean, that sounds like a weather balloon, right?
It sounds like it
Could
could
be
be
a
a
weather
weather balloon.
balloon, but it could be also something more rigid. Imagine something with the rigidity of a plane, but moving at that speed.
Sure.
Yeah,
Like
I imagine
that's supernatural at that point.
Indeed.
I can imagine the UFO would have the capabilities to move slower
I mean,
over a shorter period of time.
well, that's
Like,
interesting you mentioned that because they actually have the Navy release the footage of the crafts moving. Um, and I don't know if
when
you guys have paid attention to any of the stuff that's come out afterwards, but there were a lot of people that interviewed the people that were flying those jets. And
I heard about these reports, but I haven't seen the videos or any of the
One of
evidence around it. I just heard
one of
about
the
it.
videos is very compelling. The one that sticks out to me is a video where there is it's footage taken from the cockpit of a fighter jet that was tracking an object flying through the sky. And this one's been confirmed by the United States government.
right, is that the one where
Um,
it tilts sideways
it's
like a
it's
gimbal?
one of the tic tac shaped
Yep.
UFOs,
Okay.
and it just
Do you
kind
guys
of
have a link you can send me so I can watch this?
uh, we can get that to you. I will find it.
I have it. Here you go.
Oh, he's got it. Excellent.
Perfect.
So this is actually the video that I wanted to talk about, anyways,
Yeah.
because
Do you want to cover this now, or do you want to wait to get to this? Because I'll watch the video and we'll talk about it a little after we cover more of this.
it's up to you.
Up to you.
Let
Well,
let me watch it, and I'll get some ideas to talk about this.
Okay. So, so we mentioned earlier too. Why would aliens have started to show up about this time? Like, because it seems like there weren't many reports.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have shows like Ancient Aliens,
Oh, yeah.
things like that, saying they may have been here for a very long time. Uh, but it was really UFO sightings by the general public, acknowledged as such, didn't really start until after this time period, and it could be a lot of it may have had to do um, with nuclear technology.
Sure.
Once we got to that point where we could split the atom, people's imaginations might have started to run wild, because we were moving into the atomic age. But additionally, it makes a lot of sense that aliens would want to, more than anything about us, more than anything they would want to know about us, the most important thing would be to know about our military power, what we're capable of,
Sure.
how capable of harming them we might be.
Assess the threat
Uh,
level.
That's
Well,
right. So
I've watched quite a bit of Ancient Aliens. Not that it's a reliable source, but
right,
they have like reports from like even ancient times of like alien aircrafts
Oh,
or
sure.
stuff,
Look at all the
like in paint.
depictions.
and they often I saw this idea came from Ancient Aliens actually.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
it makes they were talking about how often these things were sighted during battles, angels descending
Yeah,
from the sky,
exactly.
uh, magical beings taking performing combat feats for one side or the other that were supernatural. I've often thought that the type of people who would be considered wizards and why there were tales of witches, wizards, people capable of magic is often because it's
They
simply
were.
somebody who discovered a science that
We
we
do not.
don't understand
We
yet.
don't under.
So
Yeah,
imagine
exactly.
imagine if you went back in time with a gun, right?
Exactly. Yep.
You
Or
could
nuclear
start
Oh,
reactor.
blasting people
I've
and
often imagined this. Like,
right.
you go
You
on.
would you could be a wizard effectively.
Sure.
Uh, because that you go into this area and all of a sudden you somebody approaches you with a weapon and then dies.
Yeah. I
They
mean,
hear
A
a
ma-
crack, a bang, and then dies.
what
a
was the
magic
example that I heard?
And
Where
everybody
did
else is like, "Holy shit!"
Well,
where did you get that magic stick?
it's like on the Joe Rogan show, the podcast, they talked about with Bob Lazar actually taking a
Bob
nuclear
Lazar, yeah,
taking a nuclear reactor and putting it back in, the Renaissance time. Now you would have their scientists and their philosophers look at it, take it apart, try to understand it, open it, and they would die, right? Because of, the radiation.
right.
And then you would have all these other people that would come in, look at it, and go, "Oh my God, all these people are they're dead," and then they would die.
That's there's a
That's
theory about the Ark of the Covenant that it is a some sort of
nuclear reactor.
artifact of alien technology
I wouldn't be
that because the
feasible.
people who watch it are often they become sickly and frail as they guard it, and anybody who opens it and looks at it apparently dies.
Sure.
That's the legend, at least. So a lot of this ties into uh, aliens as a whole, and a lot of this can be explained pretty easily. Of course, anything can be explained really easily when you start making guesses at supernatural things
Well, if
occurring.
you simplify
But
it,
there's
I
a
think.
lot of interesting, right? There's a lot of interesting connections, though.
Indeed.
I guess I would
Oh
say
yeah.
because there aren't many people in Vietnam who are claiming of angels descending from the sky and smiting their foes
No.
That's true.
with lightning bolts and whatnot.
No.
So
My favorite, my favorite from Ancient Aliens, I remember, is them talking about a desert being turned into glass. I don't remember the whole story, but this whole civilization got like wiped out, and there's like archaeologists have found like areas where like the sand was basically turned into glass,
Right.
and for something to be that
take
hot,
extreme heat
yeah,
for something like
like
that to
would be
happen.
like extremely powerful. Like,
So so it makes a lot of sense why aliens would be interested in the human race more after the 40s, because if you're watching,
or
uh,
during wartime for
that's
sure.
right, if you're watching a race of violent apes fight each other, and then all of a sudden one of them splits the atom, something that maybe you did centuries ago,
Sure.
uh,
Yeah.
but is like a catalyst for for moving into a new type of civilization, uh, type A civilization to a type B civilization. That would definitely be something that they'd be interested in. They'd want to make sure they keep tabs on our capabilities.
I would certainly want a front row seat for that.
So, as I mentioned before, I noticed a similarity in the Navy UFO video that they released, and what's interesting to note here is that the interview with the person that I was actually flying this jet that captured this tic tac shaped UFO. Um, you have to understand that this wasn't the only one that was present. They captured a whole fleet of these on radar. That's information that wasn't really passed down to the public, but with an interview with the person that flew the plane, that's what they said. And other people that were in the area also stated the same thing. So it's pretty compelling evidence to note that that's interesting that that's not the only one that was there. But the fact that I wanted to touch base on is if you looked at the video of the UFO itself, you notice this like white emission around it, kind of like an aura almost. And there's a lot of speculation on what that is, and that's how the craft is powering its movement and all that. But in the
It'd just
photo,
be a reflection.
no, that's not a reflection. That's that because you have to think
No.
this is an infrared device. So if it was a
Oh, you're talking
reflection,
about the video
the video,
by
yeah,
the
yeah,
pilots.
correct.
Okay.
No,
I
so
thought you were
yeah,
talking about the photo.
no, the photo in the Battle of LA. If you actually look at that and you look at the video that the Navy released, you can kind of see that they both have like a weird like aura around it. It's really hard to see it in the photo from 1942 because it's so old. But if you
Yeah.
actually pull it up on Google, you can just Google the Battle of LA and pull it up. You'll kind of see
And
that.
when you talk about the grays and the whites and the different kinds of aliens that have supposedly visited mankind,
Sure.
the grays are the ones with the saucers, I believe, and the whites are the ones with the
Yep.
tic tacs.
Not sure.
And the
There's so many different.
reptilians are probably interdimensional. They've been here the whole time.
That'll be a fun
Hyper
episode,
evolved dinosaurs.
right? And they say all the dinosaurs were extinct, not the lizard people.
They never left. They
They
evolved with the
never
meteor.
left.
Yeah, they actually took the resources and became more intelligent. They ate the meteorite.
They ate the meteor. Or the bacteria brought here from, I'm just speaking sci-fi nonsense, but the bacteria that the meteor brought got into the eggs and breeded these super reptilian creatures.
Well, did you hear about the so
They've been here the whole time.
there are theories about how we evolved, right? Were we did we evolve on planet or did we come out from like bacteria outside the planet? And is that even possible? They actually did an
It's probably a
experiment.
mix of both. I mean,
It,
I'm sure
it's
outside
possible.
interference had a lot to do with our development.
Yeah, but not even from a meteorite. You could actually have a microbe fly into our Earth and make it.
That's true. I watched a thing with Neil deGrasse Tyson where like particles from space are constantly coming down into our
Yep.
atmosphere.
And
They have
they did tests on this too.
yeah, they have things that show you like the room lights up when a particle enters the room, and it happens more frequently than you think.
I believe it.
I mean, I don't understand all of it. I usually just listen. He has a soothing voice. I listen to it to sleep. But but I just watched the video. It looks really good. Like that's
Yep. The history
And
wow.
came
the
out with.
Navy, like the theory is that we're being groomed for disclosure now.
That's a good.
With all the uh, low key things that are starting to be confirmed by the government, they're starting to say things like, "Yeah, well, we definitely have a division that tracks UFO activity, and we definitely have some unexplainable pieces of evidence uh, where we're seeing objects that we can't explain, and we can't explain how they move, and we can't
No, we
explain
can't. The
where
propulsion
they
of them,
came from."
which is why the
And
Bob Lazar story is so fascinating.
yeah, maybe we might have to do an entire separate
I would love to
episode on
just
Bob
on
Lazar.
I would
Bob
love to.
Lazar is a very interesting character.
It's a very
Um,
I
intriguing
would
story.
yeah.
I know a lot about that. I've done a lot of research. A lot.
And I looked up weather reports from February 25th, 1942 from LA, and there's no data. It's all a big cover up. It's
Oh,
aliens.
yeah, yeah. Oh, real quick though, Guster, you mentioned disclosure being possibly a thing. Um, as of June 23rd, actually, Senate Intelligence Committee wants the UFO reports to be made public.
that'll
Any,
be really interesting information to look at.
anything the government has, they're trying to get out, and you know what? It's not just a national security thing, right? It is, but as far as what would that do to society? What would that do to?
Well, it depends on how they approach the situation. If they
Yeah, you can
if
go as
they
far as that.
if they spoon feed us palatable amounts of information, slowly, then it might be less catastrophic than if they were to just dump like, oh yeah, there's whites and grays and reptilians, and they all exist. In fact, 2 presidents ago was a reptilian, and
Or
like if
what's
they
the
start dropping information like that on us all at once, like people might lose their fucking minds.
well, you know
So
about Valiant Thor, right?
I'm not familiar with that. No.
He is actually apparently I guess he's an alien from I'm trying to think of what I don't know. I'm trying to think. Damn it.
Well, I looked it up and I got Valiant Thor is an American southern rock / heavy metal
Right.
band.
Oh,
No, I'm looking.
yeah. He's essentially he's worked with the government and he's been with the government for a long time.
I've heard the name before. I just
Yeah, he I think he's from Venus. I believe that's where he's from. And he's like this really tall, lengthy looking guy, really odd looking guy. But there's that interesting story that and I wouldn't know if he would be a gray or a white or what he would be, but
He would probably be a white
that's
because
what I'm
grays are
thinking.
pretty easy to tell, but
Grays are small.
whites tend to look a lot enough like us that they can blend in as long as they're wearing our clothing and not their own. Because their own clothing has like radioactivity to it that makes it like shimmer and shine in an odd way. Apparently,
Yeah.
this is all according to a podcast that I'm a big fan of. Last podcast on the left, who just did
Yeah.
a series on the white aliens called the Tall Whites. Um,
I mean,
which
it's
was
awesome.
very interesting to listen to, but it's about the story of a guy who may not be the most reliable narrator, and certainly needs to deal with some indigestion problems based on the number of times he vomited in his self or autobiography.
Take 3. One moment, please.
Yeah, no, basically the
Flip
dude.
page.
I'm gonna look up his name. His
Podcast.
first name is Charles. Charles. No, I don't.
Charles Darwin?
Xavier. No. You have a special gift I must exploit for my students.
You're an alien.
You're a mutant, Kyle. my my favorite thing to say lately is if I wrote Harry Potter, I would have Hagrid go, "You're a fucking wizard, Harry." Yeah, Harry,
You're a fucking wizard, Harry.
yeah,
Wow.
Harry, you're a
from
fucking wizard, Harry.
PG-13
He's like
rated R.
he's all drunk and
Yeah.
slurring his speech.
No, what I need you to do, Harry, is I need you to take this cart. I need you to run at that wall, Harry. you gotta run right at the wall as fast as you can. You gotta
Give Harry Potter like a Rick and Morty kind of feel.
yeah.
That'd be kind of cool.
Hey, take this wand and say Leviosa.
Point at that girl's skirt over there. You're a predator, Harry.
Harry.
Oh my
Hey,
god.
Hey, take this out. Take this owl. He's your best friend. Your best friend, Harry. I've never seen Harry Potter or read the books, but that's
They're actually
that's
really
all
good
the
movies.
information I know about Harry Potter, and I just
So-
ran with it.
They're really good movies.
This guy Charles Hall apparently interacted for a certain amount of time with the Tall Whites, and just every time anything out of the ordinary would happen, the first thing that would happen afterward would he would puke. So, not even with the alien. Like there was one time he was talking about like unloading helium cartridges because he worked at a weather station, and he's like, and it was so hot that I puked. And it's just, I'll have to. I'd like to say I'll have to read his book to better understand this character a little bit before we talk too much about him. But from what I understand, his book will make you want to actually die with how boring it is. So maybe I'll take some time and start reading it and try not to gouge my eyeballs out with a spoon.
I got a closing statement. I guess from this episode, what I can really take from this is after the Battle of LA in 1942 is when I think UFOs in general started getting more noticed in America or in this country, because that really, I feel like they were exposed. The public was exposed to something different that they've never seen before,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, on a bigger scale.
and
And
I
people's
think
eyes were
that's
on the
really
skies a lot more too. What with
Absolutely.
having to worry about death falling on
in
you. I mean,
in and shortly after, say the '60s, not 20 years later, we started space programs,
Sure.
that's
and
right. Though some would
it
say
causing
that's
more
due.
people to look up to the sky to look for more things. And I bet if you do some research yourself, you'd start to see the amount of UFO sightings increased significantly after this date.
And say that a lot of the reason why we don't see as many sightings nowadays is because people's faces are down into their phones a lot of the time. They're not looking out at the
That's
stars,
true.
not looking up at the sky. Uh,
Did
but
we
also
cover did we cover the Venezuelan UFO
the
sightings?
Brazil UFO sighting, you
Brazil.
mean?
Yeah. You
Right.
want to
This was
cover that
very
real quick?
recent. Yeah, yeah. This was really recently. Apparently, there was a UFO sighting in Brazil, which was followed by a period of time where there was a loud explosion heard outside of a city. I don't know exactly where. We'll have to do a little more research on it, and we'll get some more updates on that later.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a
there's an explosion
reports
out
of
in the
a
woods, and then people were trying to fly drones in to see what was going on. The military was shooting their drones out of the sky.
I could not
Uh,
yeah.
find a video on that. I know you talked about it, and I
I did
searched.
watch a video on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything super easy to see. It was
I can
just from
and
the city, and you could see explosions out in the woods, like they were shooting at something out there. Like
yeah, you could hear
it was,
gunfire
Godzilla.
and explosions.
yeah.
Oh,
So that's super interesting.
Yeah, I would
that
like to definitely
it,
see
And
that.
we
and
should.
the
If any more
'60s.
reports come out of that, we'll probably cover that in a future episode on UFOs or
We will
whatever.
we will
But
definitely talk about that in the future, for sure. So that gives me a good point to segue into or a good time to segue into this, and that is that was our show on the Battle of LA. Thank you, wonderful listeners, for your time. Thank you for your patience for us to get this second episode out, and hopefully the next episode comes a little quicker than this. We'll have to have somebody crack the whip at us, so to speak, to get us
Indeed.
going. Uh,
And give us
so I
itchy fingers.
appreciate you. And anybody else want to say anything before we sign off?
No, thanks
I
for.
just want to say, as um, as the X Files guy would say, I forget his name.
Mulder.
Mulder.
Yeah, Agent Mulder would say, "The truth is out there."
Yeah, and eyes off your phones, eyes to the skies, guys. Thanks again.